Hi everybody, welcome back to another Quarantime with Brennifry. I am Tori. And this is our Batman animated series / New52 run video. It's coming out on Monday, a little bit later, but we did our re-recording of Buffy on Saturday and it just kind of threw us out of whack. So we're playing catch up today. Since we did what we were up to on Saturday for you guys, today we're going to do kind of like what we're expecting to do this week. Not a whole lot. I have a bunch of Zoom meetings, various teaching stuff. I had a student write a beautiful, beautiful draft on Lord of the Rings that I'm bullying them into submitting it to an academic conference because it was just so good and I can't wait to read the final product. Pretty regular week today. I have a desert tortoise. His name's Rocky. I've had him since I was like 4. And I let him come inside today because whenever he wants to come inside, I just let him because he's my child. And like a couple hours went by and I'm like, he's being awfully quiet because he like whistles. He goes like, yeah, it's really cute. And I didn't hear him whistling. And so I was like, huh, what's he up to? So I'm like looking for him and I can't find him. And he's pretty big. He's like 12 pounds. And so I'm looking all over my apartment for him. I'm like, where did he go? And I look in the bedroom and he's sleeping halfway under the bed next to my cat. Like they're just cuddled with each other.
That is
and it
so
was
cute.
really adorable.
Definition of unlikely pet friendships or
It
animals.
was really cute. So that's what I've been up to. I'm going to pass it on over to Jen.
Hi guys, I'm Jennifer. So like Tori said, we already did our recap last time, so we're just going to do short previews. So like Tori, I expect a lot of Zoom meetings this week as well. Not looking forward to that in my regular life, but in terms of what I'm going to do on my own leisure time, I'm thinking that I'm going to still be playing Animal Crossing, the fox that sells arts that is both, it's a chance if it's a real thing or a forgery, just came into my game and I just feel like, and I joined this group chat for Animal Crossing with my colleagues. And so it's going to be interesting because I feel like I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm having fun doing it. I am also I'm keeping up with a couple K-dramas. So Hospital Playlist is fantastic. It's on Netflix. It's a slice of life hospital drama. So it's one episode per week and the cast is amazing. I'm also watching The Eternal Monarch with Lee Min-ho because he's awesome and I grew up with him. I saw him on Boys Before Flowers. Brenda knows. And so I just found out that I will watch anything with him in it. I guess I am a fan of his, and even though the drama itself is kind of slow. But that's kind of what I'm up to this week. And also instead of mugs, we're going to do this thing where we kind of show and tell. So this is something that I have in my room. This is actually really related to my to the topic today, which is New52. So this is one of the volumes, volume 3, Death of the Family, and look how cool this is.
That is so cool.
This is super cool. So that slip-on just kind of works as that Joker mask that if you read the story, he like takes his face off. He like surgically cuts off his face and then sews his face back on. So it's equally more terrifying. So this is one of my goodies to share. Tori, do you have something to share?
Yes, I do have something to share. It's right here. Okay. This is one of my favorite things I've ever bought. It was very expensive for what it is, and I don't care. This is my Power Rangers. It was for the like 30 or the 25th anniversary, like here they are again thing, right? It's their helmets. They come off, but you have to like break their heads open to do it, and that makes me feel sad. And it has their, Blue Ranger, Pink Ranger, Red Ranger, etc. And I love it so very, very much. I bought it to myself as you taught 9 classes last semester. You deserve nice things. Gift to
That
me.
Is so sweet. That's like You're like the best gift giver to yourself.
I am. I was like, it's very expensive, but I deserve expensive things.
That is true. I mean, 9 classes, you're a hero, man.
Oh, I know. I was like, I deserve to spend a little bit of my money on something Power Rangers because Power Rangers merchandise is so hard to come by. Like, I feel like there just really isn't much in the way of Power Rangers merchandise. Like, I feel like clothing, there aren't very many clothing options. Target actually has some really great miniatures. Jen got me some for my birthday a few years back. But yeah, I feel like they're really hard to come by, like Power Ranger stuff. Even and especially Power Ranger stuff that isn't Mighty Morphin, like is even harder to find. I feel like they'll have Mighty Morphin, but they rarely have like Dino Thunder or Time Force or Mystic Force or all the other ones that I'm like kind of just naming my like top favorites. But
I always see that too.
yeah, like I just feel like there isn't a whole lot of merch out there for those. 'Cause Time Force is probably one of my favorites. But yeah, I just feel like there isn't a whole lot of merch. Well, I don't, as a collective whole, Time Force isn't my favorite. It just has one of my favorite Pink Rangers ever, which is Jen. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Did you buy that online? Did you ship
Yeah, I saw it at that one Nerd Swap meet you guys told me about.
that? Okay, right.
That in City of Industry, I forgot what it was called. Frankensons, I think.
Okay.
Shout out to them. I saw it there, and they were it was really like extra, like super expensive there. So I just kind of like took a picture of it, and then like wrote down the brand name, and then looked on Amazon, and it was half the price. So.
Yay!
But, yeah.
Wow. Brenda, how are you doing this week?
Hi everyone, I'm sorry about that. I had a little mishap in here. My cat decided that feeding time was right now, and she came in here meowing up a storm. So first I muted, and then I had to take care of my child.
No problem.
Because, I do apologize for that. This week I'm actually going to, well, not going to, but will be part of a lecture on microaggressions and racism in classrooms. So really looking forward to that. Those lectures and meetings are always kind of, they're two-sided, right? On one hand, they're really deep and we get into stuff, but on the other hand, it really forces people to look at their own internal biases, and those always lead to uncomfortable conversations. So there's a lot of work being done there, and so it's great on one hand, but it's also really slow work. So it's just one of those things. So I'm looking forward to that, but also very cautiously optimistic, if that makes sense. My nerd object of the week is going to be my Louis plushie. Hi. This guy, I was going through some really tough stuff a few months ago. It might have been a year ago at this point. I don't know, but it was a while ago. And Jen surprised me with this guy and his two brothers. And I love Louis. He's probably my favorite, but I think my soul is really Huey. Like I am Huey. So yeah.
Okay, that's very, very cute.
Thank
Well, you're welcome. I am a really good gift giver, guys.
She funded like 90% of my nerd shirts. Like I have Ninja Turtles on today, and like all of my nerd shirts with a handful from
funded
Brenda.
at least the other half.
Yeah, Brenda's gotten me the other half, and Jen has funded or has given me like 90% of my wardrobe.
Yes. You can't math, right? Because it's like you used to just half and 90, but it's okay. We're English majors, so it's fine.
Yeah, yeah.
We're not supposed to be great at math.
True.
So today's talk is going to be centered around Batman, the animated series. That's my favorite topic. And also, we're going to spotlight New 52 Batman with Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. I hope I said his last name right. I always can't say anyone's last name right ever. So I'm sorry, Greg, if you're out there watching this. Probably not. But I think we are going to be spending part of that time talking about animated series, and then the second part will be sharing our highlights from the 10 volume run of the series as well. So I'm going to start our conversation today with, how did you get into Batman, the animated series? What are some of the things that you remember from your childhood that really stuck to you to this day?
I don't remember how I got into it. I think it was just playing on the WB and I would watch it. It was, and I hate using this word because I think but it is very 90s, right? It was a boy series, right? But I didn't care. I really enjoyed watching it. It was dark, but age appropriate in a very weird way. I remember really loving Harley, because really anytime there's a female character, I remember just being into it. But Harley in particular, she was just so full of life and energy and so sparkly all the time, right? And so I just really gravitated to her as a character. But yeah. How did you get into Batman, Tori?
Yeah. So I don't remember when or how I started watching it as well. I just kind of remember it being on. It was on at like 5 or 6 o'clock, or like one of those kind of prime time slots. It was just kind of on when I was kind of done with homework. And so I don't remember if Justice League animated series was on at the same time or if it came after, but it was kind of, I just remember like watching all these superhero stuff on like WB, kids WB specifically, I feel like. It was just kind of in that lineup, right, with like, I think Jackie Chan, Batman, Cardcaptor Sakura, like I feel like they were all kind of in a row. And I just kind of watched that like stream of it, right? That's kind of how I jumped into it. I think one of the things that has stuck with me, I think about this scene a lot. I find myself thinking about it at night still, is there's this scene where Harley decides she is going on the straight and narrow. She is going to be a good person. She's got her certificate that she is sane, right? She's been declared sane and she's got her piece of paper that says she is, and so she is. And she buys this dress with her hard-earned money at a department store, and they try to take the dress back from her because they forgot to remove the tag, and she's like, "Get your hands off me! I paid for this with my own money!" She like grabs a mannequin arm and starts like swinging it around. She's like, "I'm a good person!" Like, and I just like thought about it, and like as I've gotten older, I'm like, I just understand that moment. Like as an adult, I'm like, yeah, we are good people, and sometimes like people need a backup arm and hit you with a mannequin arm.
Okay. I think I don't even have words.
I don't want to follow, but that was hilarious. Yeah.
I don't have words for that. Yeah. I mean, I do think that nowadays I think that's an apt kind of thing to say nowadays, right? Like with social distancing.
Right. Like I'm social distancing. If you come near me, I will hit you with a mannequin arm.
You just like pull it out of like your bag. You just start swinging that thing around.
It's like,
it's fair to say that quarantine is getting to us a little bit.
A little bit.
But that's going to be a disclaimer for this.
Yes.
But it's also just us, though.
But the key feature when swinging the mannequin arm around is you have to be yelling, "I'm a good person. I have a piece of paper that says I'm a good person."
I do think I remember this episode. I think it's one of the episodes where like she breaks up with the Joker or something.
Yeah, she's no longer with Joker.
Right. It's like that one time she's shopping with her hyenas.
It's right in that section. Yep.
Right. And then I do think that like QMX figures have like that exact scene as a figure. So I will do that story. Like I think
the best scene ever. I love it.
Right. I do think that like for me, like it was the same thing for you guys. I don't know how or when I got into it. I just remember it that I just start watching it, right? And it was so intriguing to me because like the music, I think the soundtrack was probably what got me first, right? Like the Batman animated series, as all Bruce Timm series have like this really like nice operatic opening to all their shows, right? And so I remember like being attracted to that. But I also remember it being taking place during I think the superhero hour, right? You had Batman and you had Superman right afterwards. And it would take place around 3 or 4 in the afternoon on WB. So I remember watching it because of it, but I just loved just the action sequences. I loved like the heroism aspect. I mean, this is around the time that Power Rangers was also out. So like I was definitely into this kind of shows where like people kicked butt and were awesome at doing it. And then there was like some nice like hero saving and community saving of the day. So I definitely remember that. And I definitely remember that was the reason why I liked it. I don't like it, but how I got into it, I don't know. I think the TV was just on at the right time. But I think for me, Bruce Wayne was my first crush.
Oh.
I'm okay admitting that. Like, there's just something so great. Like, I think it was Kevin Conroy's voice. Can we talk about like how iconic Kevin Conroy's voice?
Read Batman in his voice.
He's the only Batman. Like, yes. I don't care about who was the best Batman. Like, the only Batman is Kevin Conroy.
Right. Like, he's so tied to it's like RDJ, Robert Downey Jr., it's Iron Man. Like, Kevin Conroy is just Batman.
I still read Batman in comics in his voice. Like,
oh yeah, definitely.
That's like,
I did not like the the Batman iteration that was just on the CW crossover for Crisis on Infinite Earth. I didn't care for that version of Bruce Wayne. I love Kevin Conroy, but I didn't like the fact that he was kind of evil. But but beyond that, love him.
You know what else? Speaking of the voice actors in the show, I think in addition to having my favorite Batman voice actor, it has my favorite Joker voice actor as well.
Oh yeah, Mark Hamill. Okay,
best Joker.
Okay, so people know Mark Hamill for Star Wars, for doing the Luke Skywalker thing. I didn't grow up with any of that, and I know that's like a huge piece of like pop culture and like nerdom, and I didn't grow up. I didn't know any of that until like close to adulthood. I knew Mark Hamill because he was a Joker voice, and I didn't even connect that they were the same person until later in life.
Absolutely 100% same.
Yes, same here.
So I didn't grow up with Star Wars. I enjoy it, but I'm not a huge Star Wars nerd. I'm more of a Harry Potter person. I know those two things aren't even related, so I'll just say I'm more of a Trekkie. But see, that should show you how much of a not Star Wars fan I am. It's fine. I'll watch it, but it's not my thing.
Yeah.
But Mark Hamill, absolute legend when it comes to Joker. And, you know, when the announcement that Heath Ledger was going to be the Joker came out, I was disappointed. Like a lot of people were at the time. I remember a lot of people were disappointed. So pleasantly surprised, but part of it was because of the animated series, right? And that version of the Joker. I look at that Joker, and to me it makes sense. Adam Brody, right? That looks, and I would imagine he would sound like Mark Hamill, right? And so when I watched Heath Ledger as a Joker, I was really happy with it, but I realized how connected I was both to Kevin Conroy's voice, but also to Mark Hamill's voice as these two iconic characters, right?
Yeah.
So anything beyond them two voicing the character, I'm fine with, and I'll watch it and I'll enjoy it. But there's a space in my heart for those iterations of Batman and Joker that will never be replaced.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. I agree. Like Toy said, he reads Batman and Kevin Conroy's voice. I think I kept saying Conrad. Sorry. I just can't speak well today. But I read the Joker in Mark Hamill's voice. Like that laugh to me is so iconic.
Yeah.
So menacing.
Yeah.
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 Honestly, it's iconic. Like I can't believe that he wasn't the first pick for that role. Like he auditioned and didn't get it until like the other guy backed out. And I'm like,
how?
That role,
I didn't know that piece of trivia. Are you serious?
Yeah, definitely. Like he just happened to get into the role. And like, I'm like, that is just, how does that even happen? It's like, you know, Tennant not playing number 10 or Picard, or like Sir Patrick Stewart not being Picard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have a world. I'm sorry, I just don't.
Yeah, and I think I was similar to Brenda when Heath Ledger was announced as Joker. I was really off put just as that rendition of Joker altogether, just from the previews as before I had seen it. Because I was like coming off an animated series where Joker's makeup is so polished and he's like dressed in a nice suit and like
very zoot suit, right?
Yes. And Heath Ledger's was kind of like messy and like and I was like, what? Like, I mean, I think Heath Ledger did a great job. He's not my favorite Joker, but which I get flamed for a lot, but I think he did a great job.
Well, because Mark Hamill's our favorite Joker.
Because Mark Hamill's my favorite Joker.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Brenda and I talked about this too. Like, I felt, you know, very similar to you two right now, that when Heath Ledger was announced as the casting for Joker, I was like, and how he won over Adrian Brody, I was just like, nope, like, I don't see it, I don't get it. Like, you know, I was looking for more of that aesthetic, because I think Adrian had that like Joker aesthetic that we grew up with, right? He pulled that off, and so I was really upset by it. After having watched the movie and, you know, having distance from it now, absolutely, I think Keith was absolutely the right choice for that, right? I think that considering like the tone that Christopher Nolan was going for and what that cast was going for, Heath Ledger fulfilled the role, right? And he absolutely delivered in terms of what that role needed to be, and delivered on the impact of that role, right? And, you know, he absolutely deserves all the accolades for that role, because he did do a fantastic job for that series. So, but yeah, but it doesn't take away from the fact that like my Joker is always going to be Mark Hamill.
Same. It'll always and forever be Mark Hamill.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and for me, like, that's his titular role. Like, I know like folks are married to him as Luke, and I'm like, nope. Like, for me, like, his iconic role is Joker, and always will be. Like, because I just think he has more fun with that role too. Like, I think that like you see him in interviews and stuff, and like clearly he has a lot of love for the Star Wars family, because obviously I gave him his start, but you just see how much love and fun he has with the Joker role.
Yeah.
I just appreciate that a lot more and see that.
He did a thing on YouTube where he was reading Donald Trump tweets in the Joker voice, and it's so good.
Oh yeah, I heard about that. No,
it's really good.
No, I watched the one where he did Joker and Luke, and so he's
I've seen that one too. When he's so great.
He's so great, yeah. But I mean, you put Kevin and Mark together, and they're just a fantastic duel. Like that to me is just like the golden standard. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and and that's something that I really appreciate from the Bruce Timm era is just how well they did those series, right? And just what they did for that Batman character. Like the Batman the animated series definitely had more of a detective show feel, right? It was very kind of dark for a kids show. Like, let's talk about that. It was dark for a kids show, and they weren't afraid to go there. And I think that's part of the reason why it's so enjoyable into adulthood, right? And why it's kind of lasted, because it doesn't stay within that time frame of this is just for kids. It's hitting on some pretty adult themes, and I really enjoy that, because I think that gives kind of some breathing room for the story to kind of evolve and grow and hit and impact in different kind of ages.
There's definitely a timeless energy to the Batman animated series that I think it's very much like the Pixar movies, right? Where both children and adults can enjoy them, right? And it's such a nuanced balance to hit that I think the writers really captured with the series, because it has that formulaic, like monster of the week kind of feel to it, while also holding like a longer and larger narrative, right? And to do that with a children's story, but also not necessarily a children's story, right? I think it is very difficult, but I think they did a good job. And something like that legacy, then you saw things like Batman Beyond kind of try to pick up, right? And even Justice League, right? They kind of did things similarly where they try to hit that balance. But I think, and even Superman, the animated series, which I actually found kind of boring when I was a kid.
I didn't like that one either.
Yeah.
I didn't like Superman. I love it now, though. It's fantastic.
Okay. I need to give it another watch.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that you have to appreciate with age, right? I didn't enjoy it as a child. And I really tried. That's why for so long I was like, no, I'm a Batman girl. I don't care about Superman. Like, who cares about all your superpowers? I don't care. Right? I've grown to appreciate the Superman animated series now as an older adult. Well, not older, as an adult, aging myself. But that wasn't the case with Batman, right? It was kind of love at first sight and continuous love into adulthood, right? Because I'll go back and there'll be episodes that I'll pick up that are like, oh yeah, I really enjoy that, right? And there's something about Paul Dini and oh my goodness, I'm blanking on this other guy's name, but something that they just really did well with the animation and the casting of this particular series that I don't know, there's just a timeless energy to it.
Definitely. And it gave us a lot of great, like the show did a really good job of spotlighting a lot of the rogues in a really like palatable way. So like if you pick up so Batman definitely has like I think it has an 80-year history. But if you pick up like a Frank Miller Batman comic book, that's just not going to hit tonally as well as like the animated series, right? And so I think that the animated series did a really nice intro for all of these rogues who are creepy in their own way, have their own issues in their own way, really creepy issues that like we should really examine psychologically, right? But they made it so that it was palatable for children to enjoy and to kind of give new comic readers or new superhero viewers a way and an entry into this world, right?
And humanizing those rogues in a lot of episodes too, because it was, and I think that's one of the things about Batman that makes it so interesting, right? It's they're evil, yes, and they're crazy, yes, but there's a level of humanity to each individual rogue, right? And I think the animated series did a good job of capturing that, right? Like with Clayface, he creeped me out as a child. He really terrified me, but I felt bad for the guy, right?
And I had sympathy for like Dr. Freeze and Harley and Ivy, and like even though they were doing bad things, I was able to see like, well, maybe it's not black and white.
People need help, right?
Right.
One of the things that I appreciate with Batman, it's always, you know what? I'm not going to use a gun. I'm going to help these people.
Yeah, and I felt like in animated series, he tried really hard to talk to them a lot of the times too. Like, why are you doing this? Like, can I help? Like, how can I help you? Like we don't have to resort to violence.
Conflict resolution through dialogue, yeah. And I remember seeing that and thinking, wow, that's a little different.
Yes, definitely. I mean, this is one of my, like, it's not in the animated series, but obviously, like, you have the same team producing Superman, animated adventures, and you have the same team producing Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. And so one of my favorite scenes was it takes place in Justice League. And it's a flash forward episode where it's a split between Batman Beyond and Justice League Unlimited, and Amanda Waller's telling the story to Terry about this one adventure that Batman went on where he had to eliminate Ace, who is like the youngest member of the royal family gang and who suffers from this like brain thing. And so he goes in with the mission. He's given the mission to kill her on site. And he goes in and she's like this little girl, like 13. And all he does, they have a conversation and all he does is listen to her. And she's like, can you just sit here? I know I'm going to die. can you just sit here and hold my hand on the swing? And so he does.
Yeah, I remember
right?
that.
And I think that just kind of speaks to that humanity and speaks to what Brenda was talking about earlier really well, right? That impulse not to use violence first, to have these diplomatic conversations first. Obviously, each writer and each author takes a different side of Batman. There's a lot of Batmans out there that are violence first, right? But at least the one that we grew up with definitely had more of a diplomatic approach in most cases, right?
Right.
And, you know, for me, I love seeing Batgirl. Like, I got to give a shout out to my girl out there, right? Like, I love Barbara Gordon in the animated series, which is why it's been so disappointing to, like, to see that there hasn't been a movie or a live action iteration outside of the Birds of Prey. I do know that. She was pretty cool in that one. But, you know, here's this, like, she was, like, kick-ass, like, she was sassy. She had, like, this like really nice and cool like black lipstick that like totally made her look.
Yes, she was gothic, a little bit gothic. I love that. Oh, I meant you.
Yeah, like her sassy like kind of gestures. She totally owned Dick Grayson. She was best friends with Kara. Like that girl I love. Like, why is it that like no iteration of Batgirl that I've seen or read has hit that tone yet?
I'm with you, Jen. I have no words for you of comfort. I mean, because
she was like, "Oh, we can fight, but just remember, I'm smarter than you, I'm prettier than you, and I'm better than you."
Oh, right. And there's more high tech in my high heel than you know how to work. So, do you really want to come at me? Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
She was great.
Awesome. Like, I love having these moments. Like, I'm just so upset that we don't see that more often.
Wasn't there a scene? Go ahead, Brenda.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I say, wasn't there a scene, like, I'm recalling this from, like, child brain, so it might be a little wonky, but isn't there a scene where she and Dick Grayson are in, like, a vent or something, and, like, they're trying to get through it to do some mission, and she's like, "You are so annoying, just be quiet and go in the corner and let me do this," and, like, kind of, like, shoves him down and, like, goes and, like, did that happen, or did I?
That sounds very on brand, and I don't remember it, but
okay.
I remember it.
Like, I feel like they're, like, competing with each other because they're trying to, like, get Batman's favor or something like that in an episode. Like, they're trying to prove that they're, like, the more worthy one.
That sounds really familiar.
But it's, like, child brain I'm pulling this from, so.
I know there is a scene where they're trapped in the container somewhere, but that's very much definitely coming from the comics, so, like, one of their first interactions together. But I don't remember that scene from the animated. It might have been there. I just probably
Yeah.
No, I loved her. She was fantastic. But you know, you had a lot of fantastic characters in that series as well. It wasn't just Batgirl, who I love, but it wasn't just her. But obviously, I think Batman for us meant a lot in just influencing a lot of our nerdom. And to kind of just tie like the Pink Ranger and Batgirl a little bit here, like Batgirl also was introduced to us first when she was doing like gymnastics on the bar beam. Like that's one of the first opening scenes that we see Barbara in, and like Kimberly, our girl, does that too. So I'm just saying.
So I really wanted to be a gymnast, but I went to an inner city school where that wasn't allowed. Anytime someone saw us try to do a cartwheel on the playground, we were sent to the principal.
Down.
Yeah, basically. But yeah, no.
I was down steaming on sidewalk curbs, so you know.
Yeah, I did the same thing, and that's why I ended up needing braces, you guys. But yeah.
Guys, future. So clearly, like the animated series meant a lot to us. I think for us, Batman kind of, you know, has evolved with us as well. And so when we came to adulthood, we were exposed. I was exposed to New 52 Batman with Scott Snyder, and so that's something that we want to talk about. So let me screen share that while Brenda kind of leads us into the conversation first.
Alrighty, so Court of Owls. So this is a book that all right, so I've been the villain of our conversations for the last few weeks. I'm going to pass the baton over to Jen because she's actually the one that bullied us all into reading this graphic novel and series. And this is all right. So there's a difference between me telling them to read something versus Jen. Jen will tell us read this, right? But she'll have that very serious look where it's like you better read it because you do kind of fear for your life a little bit.
Yeah, and she's like, if you're an actual intellectual, you'll read it.
She'll challenge you with the conversations, right?
Yes.
She's a total Ravenclaw, right? She can't help herself. But anyway, that said, hi Angel. I'm sorry. He like posed for me when I was talking, so I just had to comment on that. But anyway, so she was talking about how wonderful this series was, and so she bought it, and I'm like, I don't really want to buy it. It's like she's like, oh no, she spent like a week reading the entire thing. And when I say reading it, I mean like consuming every page, because Jen is very methodical in the way that she goes about reading her graphic novel. So she's not just reading the story or the images. I mean, she's absorbing the information, right? And so she would talk about this, and it sounded fantastic. And so she had me actually start with Gates of Gotham, right? Because she said, I want you to read it in this order because it references this, right? And so Gates of Gotham isn't actually part of the Court of Owls series, but it is kind of like a prequel. So you get a little bit of history about Gotham City, and you see some of the owls, right, kind of make their first appearance. And so the Court of Owls is this essentially a court, right? It's a commentary on the classism that is deeply rooted into Gotham society. And so the Court of Owls is this elite group of really very powerful rich people in Gotham who are responsible for this, I guess you could call him I don't know, some kind of avatar or evil avatar, right? The owl that goes up, and he's basically their personal assassin. And so he will go about killing on behalf of the court. And so the Court of Owls series is Scott Snyder's run, and Scott Snyder, if you know his work, leans a little on the dark.
Yeah.
And there's an element of psychological thriller in this series, which I think is really well done. And mind you, I don't like horror, and there's a lot of elements of horror in Scott Snyder's work, just because he's Scott Snyder, and that's just his aesthetic. But one of the things that he does really well in this series is kind of deconstruct everything about the Batman legend, right? And so he builds it back up in a very not like, what's the word? I'm sorry, I'm blanking on vocabulary at the moment, but it's something different, and you're not entirely sure that he's okay at the end of this, right? You see throughout the entire run, you actually see different characters, like they all have to contend with their own version of an owl. And so you'll see Nightwing fight an owl, you'll see Barbara Gordon, really all these minor characters, or not minor, but backup characters in the Batman series kind of have to contend with their own owl. Meanwhile, Bruce is kind of like the lead figure, trying to figure out how to fight this thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Very well put. One of the things that I had not read a Batman comic in some time when Jen recommended this one to me. They asked me what I wanted to do for my birthday one year, and I said I wanted to get really drunk and then go to Barnes and Noble and buy books. And we were there, and Jen was like, seriously, you should read this. And I was like, okay, I'll give it a chance. So I ended up grabbing this one and Hush. And both fantastic choices. But yeah, I fell in love immediately with New 52, Batman's run. Court of Owls was fantastic. I immediately bought City of Owls right after, and then proceeded to borrow like Jen's entire collection to finish it off. Yeah, that was pretty much the trajectory for me. But I think that, so I do think this one does get a little, the Court of Owls and City of Owls section get pretty psychological. They don't go full like Tom King psychological on you, but Snyder gets us there. He definitely like does a lot of really cool things with the art in this book and the way the panels are constructed. And at one point you start spinning the book sideways, then upside down, and then sideways again, and then upside down again. Like it like does this full spin to read it. And I just thought that was phenomenal. That was one of the highlights of the entire run for me.
At one point, it does feel like Snyder's pulling you into Batman's descent into madness, right?
Yes, yes.
And it's very bizarre because on one hand, the story is so good that you can't help but to be pulled in, right?
Absolutely.
Like, and when I say be pulled in, I mean physically pulled in, because you are actually
Yes.
physically moved the book. But on the other hand, this is one of those few books, and I think that's part of the reason why Jen picked it, right? Because we call Jen, she kind of kills our souls a little bit with her picks. But this one is one of those, you do, they mess us up for a little bit, right? They leave us thinking for a long time is what happens. And I think this is the perfect example of it. Although this one doesn't destroy us emotionally, I guess, well, I mean, it kind of did a little bit. But it's the kind of book that leaves you thinking for a few hours, right? Just because even your own sense of, like, you start questioning your own sense of morality, right? And if how you built those moral, not necessarily those moral boundaries, right? You start questioning the foundation of it, right? Why do you think the way that you think, based on like this? Is it all just a social construct, and is that social construct equitable anyway, right? It's
right.
Yeah, it's a deep read.
Well, thank you for like telling everyone I'm the villain in your reading lives.
I mean, you did do that for me the last 2 weeks. I feel like this is a little bit cathartic for me.
That's true. Sometimes I do give you guys reads that are a bit on the psychological end.
Jen, in a nutshell, Jen goes, this book almost made me have a feeling. I wonder what it will do to the Hufflepuffs. Let's do an experiment. And you'll recommend it to us.
See what you're saying? She's a puppet master somewhere.
She's like, this could be fun to watch, sips tea. This is a true fact. This is true. I'm like, yeah, let's see what happens. By the way, Angel decided to join us for this recording as well. So this is why if you're watching, this is why he's joined us. He was getting a bit fussy right now. But going to your points, yes, I think Snyder does an incredible job of putting together this book. So I know a lot of people have their Batman writer out there. Some people are Miller fans, that's their Batman, always will be their Batman, right? There are Morrison fans out there that are just like, this was my Batman, right? And there are like Tom King fans, I'm sure, that are out there. And then and obviously I fall into the Snyder, right? Like I fall hard into the Snyder camp. I just think that what he did with this run was so incredible. It's why it got so much press during the time it came out, so why it was the main Batman title for a long time, right? Why to this day, like, Snyder gets whatever he wants at DC, I think.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, he gets to work with whatever stories he wants to work. He obviously has to pitch, right? So he has to pitch the stories. So, but he gets to work with his choice of writers, right? His choice of artists, his choice of inkers, I think. And why he and Greg, like, I think what made this book so special is what he and Greg, right, the artist of the title, did together. They formed such a cohesive version of Batman here that I think just will become like a timeless artifact in the Batman history, because the look is there to support the story that's happening here. And what makes Snyder so effective as a writer is just how much history or the literature, the like themes he pulls into his work. Not that to say that other writers don't do that, but there's something that Snyder does in his work that is so different from like Morrison, that's so different from King. Like Tom King does more of a psychological PTSD trauma kind of metaphor and journey with all his work, right? You see his influences in the CIA really push into his storytelling. and he's always about that like relationship first. Like if you notice with Tom King, he's always writing good relationships, right? He writes one for Big Barda and Mr. Miracle. That was a fantastic run, right? He does the same thing for Batman and Catwoman, right? He's really interested in these like romantic, like simple romantic stories, right? Relationship stories. He's interested in PTSD and trauma stories.
Yeah.
And with Snyder, like he's interested in history, right? He's interested in storytelling, and storytelling on a grand and epic scale, right? He's building like stories on this like larger schematic, like he wants to affect every little thing that's happening, right? So his stories are always going to feel big for that reason. And you see that in his Batman run, you see that in his Justice League run, you see that in Swamp Thing, right? You see that with American Vampire, right, where he's doing like eras. And when specifically what Brenda brought up with Gates of Gotham, you see what he was trying to, like with Gates of Gotham, that really is a prequel because he's getting into the history of Gotham, right? And why Gotham is the way that it is. And it's a fantastic like epistolary model as well, which Snyder is a huge fan of. He loves inputting like journaling aspects into his books. He did that with American Vampire, he did it with Batman, and he definitely did it with Gates of Gotham. So he really sets up a history for Gotham, and he then sees that history play out in Batman New 52.
Yeah, there's definitely layers to his story, right? Because it's not just the story that you get on the main track, right, with Batman and the court, but you also have like all these letters, and these letters always reveal something about someone, right? And Batman doesn't always have that information, right? You as a reader do, so it gives you a broader context for it. And so I think that's one of the things that kind of makes his storytelling epic, right? But also it feels a lot like, and I think this comes to your point about Snyder just being a masterful storyteller, right? And the way that George R. Martin was, at least, and I haven't read his books, but I'm just basing this off of the first few seasons of Game of Thrones that I enjoyed. But there's just something about all these minute little details really paying off big later on in the story that it's an exciting read, right? Continuously. And I think I found that's definitely to be the case with Court of Owls, but also with American Vampire, right? Where it's all these little things building up to and informing the story immediately, but also later, right? And so he has a really excellent pacing, which is very difficult to kind of capture in graphic novel storytelling, I feel, right? I love graphic novels, but anyone who reads a graphic novel knows that that's a hit or miss, right? Depending on the writer. And one of the things that Snyder does really well is that pacing. It doesn't feel random. It doesn't feel awkwardly paced, or it doesn't, like, it's not just, oh, okay, they're going to do that just for shits and giggles. There's always motivation, and he does that really consistently well.
Definitely. And so it's turn into like, we love Snyder talk.
Sorry.
No, I love it, but I think it's because, you can't talk about New 52 without talking about Snyder, right? And what he does as a writer and what he does so well across his other things, and without doing a comparison, right? So like, I think we just have to show them like some of our highlights from this, guys. So what's our first highlight?
So I'm going to start, and this is actually one of the last images on in the first volume of Court of Owls, and this is just, I picked it just because you see how menacing the court really looks. Sorry, it's taking me a minute.
That's okay.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so this is where you see like all the owls, right? And you see the people basically holding the purse strings, right? All the Gotham's elite, if you will. And they're all wearing these masks that look very owly, right? To me, they also feel very Purge-like. I've never watched The Purge because I don't like those kind of films, but this is what that feels like and what I imagine watching The Purge would look like. So you see this very small group of people basically controlling the fate of the city. And even without reading the book, I feel like the artwork, and this is shout out to the artist here, just looking at the artwork, you get that sense. This is a small group, small elite group controlling the fate of the city. And it's not for the good of the city, right? Part of that like dark reddish hueish light emanating throughout the city is so daunting, right? But it's different from what you usually see with Batman, right? With Batman, there's a lot of grays and a lot of darks, but this kind of red looks calm, but also very threatening. And
Yeah.
I think it's one of those pages that just kind of floored me when I first read it.
And what I love so much about the owls is there's this phenomenal scene. I don't remember if it's in Court of Owls or City of Owls, but basically Bruce was approached by the owls to become an owl, but he was like, nah, I'm good. And then Batman's trying to destroy them. And he's like trying to figure out like, how can I find them? How can I get their heads? How can I deal with detective stuff? And I think it's Alfred who says, owls are the only birds that don't make nests. They take over other nests. And so then Bruce is like, oh no. Then he finds out that, one of his Wayne buildings has like this hidden floor that's been infiltrated by the owls and become an owl sanctuary. And it's just such an amazing, like they're everywhere scene. Like, it's like, you can't trust anyone. It was just so great.
What's really great about this scene and just the invention of the Court of Owls was that Snyder did something that not many writers are able to do, and that's actually create a new villain or a new group of villains and add the mythology of Batman, right? So now the Court of Owls just feels like it's always been there, right? 10 years, like a couple years out from the series ending.
They worked their way onto the show Gotham.
Right, and a lot of it was because he was smart about making villains be part of that Gotham history that hadn't yet been explored in maybe other things, maybe not as extensively. Maybe I haven't read everything, so if others feel differently, please tell me so. But he started a lot of this Court of Owl stuff and that mythology built up in Gates of Gotham, right? By giving you the history of these families, because Gotham, unlike other series, like Gotham definitely has this kind of colonial feeling to it, where like only a couple of families have huge stakes and wealth in Gotham. They're the founding families of Gotham. And so when the owls came onto the scene, it just felt so natural that yes, there would be a group that would have an interest in preserving some of what Gotham was originally about from a very elitist point of view, right? And so that's something I really loved, was that it floored me too, like Brenda said, like it floored me to have this like kind of villain that just felt very real, like this can happen in my everyday life, kind of just pop onto the screen.
Well, I mean, look at the world we're living in right now, right? And I mean, you see it a lot on Instagram and Facebook and social media, really, where you're looking at the class inequities as a result of this pandemic, right? And so, I mean, it does feel real, right? And that aside, because I don't want to get too dark and too political, but or actually everything's political, so ignore that. But what I mean is, when you think about Batman's history, particularly when it comes to the Rogues Gallery, Jen, right? And you mentioned it earlier, how Batman just has such a fantastic Rogues Gallery, right? To add another villain to that, I feel like there's a sense of you kind of have to work your way up to that, right? And I feel like he really did. Effectively with this run, because this villain isn't one guy, right? It's not the owl, it's a whole society, it's a whole culture of privilege and money and power and corruption, everything that he keeps trying to save Gotham, right? And Gotham was founded on all these principles. So how do you save a city that's fundamentally at its roots corrupt and messed up and not willing to bridge the gap between poor and rich, good and evil, right? How do you even work with that? And so this villain becomes all overwhelming, for at least for me as a reader. I felt overwhelmed by the court, not even the owls themselves, but by the court, right? And their like ever looming presence that felt daunting and terrifying, which is one of the reasons why I said it's the kind of book that you have to put down and just kind of think about for a while.
Definitely. I like how yours, there was something that Snyder put out, when he was doing this run. He, Snyder likes to talk, so he'll always like give you a bit of spoilers whenever he puts down an interview with someone. And so in his one of the interviews that he did for, I think, volume 9, which I think, or 8, that covers kind of the Bloom arc.
Yeah, Bloom.
He was talking about how, he was really interested in exploring the idea of Gotham as a character, right? The city itself as a character, and that it's, and I thought that was such a really great kind of thing to think about and to really, want to explore, because not many people actually go into exploring the city and what the city feels like and what the city is and who the city is, right? Everything kind of happens in the city, to the city, but it's always like a background character. It's always a landscape. And for him to want to treat it as a character just felt so like great, like a great intuitive leap to kind of want to go there with Batman, especially because Batman is so obsessed with saving the city.
Yeah.
What happens when the city doesn't want to be saved, right? And how maybe that in itself is like his greatest antagonist, right?
Yeah. How do you add to that when the city wants to take you down with it, right? And Batman's constantly struggling with that. And so sorry.
No, definitely. And I think like what I love about this picture too is just the art. And I think I really want to demonstrate like one of Tori's favorite scenes. So if you can pull that up for us, Brenda, that'd be great.
Sure.
Because this is what hooked them. It was me pushing them, yes, but this is what hooked them.
Sorry, it's taking me a minute to find the image. It's not the eye that you're referring to, right? It's the upside down one.
Yes, the upside down. The whole sequence. So, a little context for this scene. So, Batman eventually confronts the court. He finds where the court is and where they're located, and he goes and meets them. And of course, he gets drugged, right? As any good Batman story happens. So, as he gets drugged, he starts to have sort of like hallucinations and sort of a mental breakdown. And here's where this book kind of goes from good to awesome. And this is how that marriage between Greg and Scott works and how much it's so fantastic. So Scott's able to put something down on paper and just say like, this is the story I'm running with. And Greg is able to visualize that for him. Yeah. And so I'm sure Snyder said like, he's going to have a mental breakdown. Greg interprets that as, okay, let's do a mental breakdown, but let's have the audience go on that mental breakdown with us. So all of these panels, in order to read them, you literally have to physically flip the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so good.
And I know that blew Tori's mind.
I was like, what? I'm spinning it now? Like, I was in the middle of a semester when I read this, and I was like, I walked in, I was like, okay, class, I know we were talking about this other rhetoric thing, but forget all that, we're talking about Batman. And like, I was like, here's the thing, let's start analyzing. Like,
this is such a perfect example of visual rhetoric, and we won't get into the teacher nerdy stuff, but the fact that you have to, in order for you to fully understand what's happening to Batman, you have to physically participate in reading this book, right? And this is one of those really moments where reading becomes a physical activity, right? And the stuff that you're always imagining in your head, now you become an active participant in that madness. And yes, I absolutely agree. This is a fantastic sequence because of that. But the nerdiness aside, what's happening to Batman visually is terrifying.
Yeah.
And it starts off with Batman's cloak being like his cape, sorry, not cloak, I'm sorry, Harry Potter mind frame right now. His cape is like tattered and worn, and it looks like a bat's wing, but not a healthy one,
Yeah.
right?
And
You
his
see
mask
him,
is broken for the one eye.
and you see him on the floor kind of scavenging, and
Mhm.
there's this kind of madness that I usually only really associate with the Joker, right? It and yet it's happening to Batman.
I love the bright white backdrop as well. Like that bright white, just like
That
carrying that as the crazy and the bad, where like he's the one we're rooting
contrast
for in the dark and the
highlights
black.
the madness. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I loved this scene so much. I like was screaming like in
And
my
then
head as I was reading this.
you see his visions, right? He
Mhm.
sees a old couple in front of him who we find out is who?
His parents, I believe, right? They're like the aged version of his parents if they had lived full lives. And then they turn into zombies and try to kill him.
Yeah.
Like
And the tape just gets longer, right?
I
Like
believe
notice
the gun that killed his parents is somewhere like in his hallucinations too. I feel like the court tries to make him use it at one point. Like,
yeah,
um,
I mean, honestly, like this is one of the things that just got me so jazzed about this title was just like I said, like Brenda said, that participation and that readership. I'm sure there's a lot of reader theory that can be applied here, but the fact that you were kind of experiencing that trauma and that psychological turn with him was just so visceral for me.
yeah.
And just the colors on the page, I mean, the absence of colors, should I say, on the page really helps drive that point a little bit further. There's a lot of monochrome colors that are happening on the page, right? Obviously, we always know that like monochrome is associated with Batman, but there's just a lot of stark whites, right?
Yeah.
There's a very pungent red that's happening right in the scene too, but it's only to highlight certain things, right? And it furthers that descent into madness. And that's what this is, right? That a visual and physical representation of a descent into madness.
Can we
Yes.
comment on the frames though? I actually like to think that that's an internal joke. We were just talking about Snyder being really into frame narratives, right? He likes the epistolary and the layering, and I wanted to say, oh, that's a visual joke, right? That's the framing and stuff. I actually don't know if that's true, but I'm just gonna pretend that it is.
Sure, why not? Why not?
Yeah. Yeah, it's I love it so much. I love that very last scene, the one that's completely upside down, and how, Batman's kind of freaking out and he starts yelling, he's covering his ears, yelling, and then you just see one of the Owl Talons like right behind him just creeping up with their knife. Like, just so good.
Yeah, it's so good. So one of my favorite scenes, because there's a couple. I mean, a lot.
The whole thing.
The whole thing. I love the whole thing. So
You want to just hold up the book, and so you just tell us this is my favorite thing, and just like tell us
why like this is my favorite thing in the world. I'm actually going to flip this first before you see it. Okay. So I'm going to jump ahead. So I know we talked a lot about Court of Owls and just how fantastic that was, and I'm not saying that
Right.
Court of Owls is fantastic. It is. The whole run is fantastic. You should check it out. But one of my favorite scenes, one of my favorite arcs was actually 0 Year.
Yes.
So a lot of remarks are out there and a lot of opinions are out there about how Year One, Frank Miller, is just so seminal to any Batman reading, and I agree, right? It sets the tones for Batman, and it is definitely one of those key comics to read for Batman. And so going back to Brenda's earlier comment, adding a villain is no easy task, right? Just you feel like you have to earn that. So adding another year and another seminal read is no easy feat either. And I think he accomplishes that, right? He's like, yeah, Year One is great. Year One is seminal. It's important. But I want to talk about 0 Year. I want to talk about what happens before Batman becomes the polished hero that you kind of see in year one, right? And so you get a very unpolished Bruce Wayne as Batman, right, in this series. And what he's able to do here is so fantastic. One, when are you ever going to see these fantastic colors? Like, that's one of the reasons why I love Zero Year, just the fact that like Greg and Scott decide to like kind of flip the script and say, no, let's infuse this arc with all these like neons and all of these pop colors. And so you're getting all these fantastic pinks and yellows and like bright neon pinks and yellows to boot, these bright purples in this series, in this arc. For the first time, I've never associated these colors with Batman, and to see this on the page was just, it just struck me so hard that I was like, I fell in love with this arc. I mean, there's some pacing issues, don't get me wrong, there's some plotting moments, right? There's some things that like with the Riddler that I just want to roll my eyes out, right? But the colors are so amazing in this that you just can't walk away. Like it's so attractive to the eye. And you know what? I love that he's able to present Bruce Wayne as Batman that's very unpolished, that's very rugged, that he has like a buzz cut going on, and he does know everything. Like his equipment is all that great. He's like he makes mistakes, right? When have we ever associated Batman with making mistakes? And yet here he is making very dumb mistakes. And I love that.
What I love about Zero Year as well is its physical placement in the run. It's like it comes off the end of a Joker arc, and then after Zero Year ends, it's sandwiched by another Joker arc. So it's like we kind of get this like sloppy coming of age Batman who may or may not have inadvertently created the Joker, like who just destroyed his family in the previous volume, and then we get this, and then it goes back to Joker like being all obsessed with Batman and like them just trying to kill each other.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean,
it was just such a smart, like, because I remember when I got to it, I was like, wait, I asked Jen, I was like, did I read them out of order? And she was like, no, trust me, it'll make sense. I was like, okay.
Definitely. I mean, I like how you were saying,
cliffhanger, and then you go into Zero Year.
Right. Like, I like how you were you brought up how it's in the middle of these like two other things that kind of bookend both things. And you're right. And I think it serves like as something different, as something that kind of changes the curve a little bit, right? I think that with this run, like, I feel like Greg and Scott were creatively like reinvigorated because they were working on something that was, well, they always swing for the fences. That's the thing about Greg and Scott. But I do feel like they felt like they were working on something very different aesthetically and story-wise here. And so you kind of have like this zippy energy kind of coming through with this arc that I really enjoyed. But so that's one of my geek out moments there. Is there another one you guys want to share? I can share another one.
Sure, yeah.
I have many. All right. So one of my other ones that I really love. So I'm gonna go into that Endgame arc that I'm a fan of. So that I just love. Let's talk about a little bit about this. So this scene takes place in Endgame, which is volume 7 of the Batman run. Yeah. And so, Tori talked about how in volume 3, death of the family, like Joker and Batman come to blows. And so you find out in that volume that Joker had always known who Bruce's identity was, right? So it strikes a blow to the family, like the Bat family, because they're just like, how could you have not told us that information? That information is so important. And Bruce sort of tells them, like, because it's not important. I did visit Joker once as Bruce Wayne in Arkham Asylum to confront him. And he just saw through me. He didn't see me. He didn't care. He didn't care about me as Bruce Wayne, right? Who he cared about was Batman. And so it was in that moment that I realized, like, he doesn't care about like the personal ties or anything or who I am as Bruce Wayne, because he knows that I'm not really Bruce Wayne, I'm Batman, right? And so he kind of suffers a blow with the family because of that. And so we finish that volume, go into 0 Year, and then we go into Endgame. And so Endgame is that final finale between the Joker and Batman. And it ends in a very climactic fight scene between the two, where they both end up beaten and battered over. And so they both end up in the cave, of course, and they both end up just like literally dying. And the plot here is that the Joker has released a virus into the city that needs a cure. And so the only way to get that cure is from the Joker himself, like from his spinal tap. And so they get into it, they fight, it's bloody. Like, obviously, like, Bruce ends up with this like Joker card in his eye.
His face is burnt.
Yes. And then he literally does get what he needs, and he sends up the vaccine with his dying breath. Like, this is what kind of threw fans, because Snyder kills Batman. And this one scene, he kills him.
And I think what's so important about this scene as well is because Batman and Joker, just a couple pages before, kind of what kicks the arc off, they have this kind of metaphorical breakup where Joker's like, if you're not going to play the game, then I'm done with you. And Joker like goes all out. Like, he's like, fine, I'm not going to take it easy on you. And Batman even says something like a few pages earlier along the lines of like, was he always this fast and this strong and this smart? Like, he's like, I never, like, has he been holding back all these years? And it's because Joker, he only cares about the game. And once Batman refused to play it any longer, Joker basically breaks up with him as a superhero villain power dynamic and is like, fine, then I'm just gonna kill everyone and everything and make you kill me, because that's the like ultimate perversion they can make you do.
Yeah. I mean, I think that he was able to Snyder was able to capture that relationship, that tension between Joker and Batman so well, right? That like it's a for better or worse, they're almost like a married couple.
Yeah.
One can't live without the other in a way.
It triggered when I was working on a paper at the time. I really wanted to like analyze this almost romantic-esque space of their relationship, because it's like, it's very much a relationship, like when you think about the way they function with one another. But yeah, it's such a great scene.
So
and
great.
There's like 3 more volumes after this.
Oh yeah, the Bloom arc.
Bloom, and then there's like the like kind of mismatch like last volume, right? That's kind of a whole bunch of like little minis.
Yeah, so I do like that. So the last volume is just like a last volume, just what you know. It's just,
it was to hit 50 issues, right? They kind of,
yeah, it was to hit 50 issues and maybe to even hit the 10 volumes.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of like guest writers and guest artists coming onto that volume. So it's definitely like a lot of one shots.
Yeah.
But they did write one story in there. One story that I love. That was actually a really,
is it the
really
clone one?
Huh?
Is it the clone one?
Oh, I like that one too. No, that one's different. No.
Okay. Which one did that? Oh, yes. I know what you're talking about now.
The story's called Gotham Is. And so this is sort of just serves as an epilogue to the main series, right? But what I loved about this that I didn't catch the first time was that our first volume of Court of Owls actually starts off with this as well. So the first volume of Court of Owls starts off with, there's a newspaper that has a running article called Gotham Is. And so you have that narration going in the first opening pages of Court of Owls. And to see, and then he kind of runs that through and he kind of talks about like what Gotham is in terms of just like the villainous aspects and everything. And so you're getting his perspective, like some kind of voices from him. And then this is the final like epilogue issue. And you're getting the response, you're getting the writer of the column to talk about like Gotham is, and you see like Bruce and as Batman patrolling the city.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a love letter to Batman. And what I love about it is, one, the book ending theme that like, and framing theme that Brenda picked up on, which Snyder seems to love, right? He likes to frame things and bookend things really well. But two, like, what I really loved about this is that like, this is like a fan's kind of letter, like his love letter to Batman, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where like the citizens of Gotham get to say like just how much they appreciate Batman for being Batman or for being in the city and for doing the work that he does, because they feel safer now. And the issue ends with like, Gotham is you, Batman, like you are Gotham. And so you have this entire kind of series kind of investigating and kind of explicating Gotham as a city, right, as a character. And you kind of end on this note that Gotham was never just a place. It's almost like a people, kind of like that Thor Ragnarok line, right? It's like Gotham is Batman.
Yeah.
There's no Gotham without Batman, and for it to kind of end on that note it's heartwarming. This is Snyder being sentimental here.
Can I make a really bad connection to this guy over here?
Go for it. I want to see this connection.
I would love to see this connection.
So last week, DuckTales had a new episode, and they actually had it was like this mer place, right? And Louis is one thing. He's a lot of things, right? He's kind of like the grifter of the group, but he's not sentimental, right? And so at the end of this episode, where like really it's about teaching children not to lie, right? And Merlandia is supposed to be a place where honesty reigns, right? And so he's trying to tell the mer people that Merlandia as an honest place is not actually a place. It's a state of heart, right? It's in your heart. And so as you're talking about Gotham being the people, right? I kind of made that connection. That's really why I laughed to myself, because I'm looking at DuckTales. I'm like, yeah.
Gotham is Merlandia.
Also, that's called synthesis, folks. Like what Brenda just did right there, that's called synthesis. Connecting to outside unrelated things and making those connections.
It's just a mess in here, guys. I don't know. There's just Jen used to joke that because I'm a Gemini, I know a little bit about a lot of things, and I think that's true. There's no depth in here. It's just the little things that I just keep grabbing onto.
No, but I think that like makes sense. Like I like that we're able to make these connections to our outside life, right? Like that's what's so fun about literature, and what's so fun about like having discussions, is being able to bring in like our wheelhouses and make connections to other things, right? So I think that the fact that you were able to connect DuckTales, another kind of 80s, 90s cartoon, to like this 80s, 90s thing that we're talking about, like makes a lot of sense. Well, Batman's a lot older, but for us, we were exposed in the 90s.
At the same time, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I think that, Snyder does a really great thing with this series, and I'm really curious for you guys, like, how does this series fit into the context of like the animated series for you?
Oh, okay.
You want to take this one, Tom?
Sure. Throw me right under the bus.
Well, I didn't know. I thought you had a response. I can start. I can totally start. That's totally fine with you. Sorry.
This is what I do, guys.
What was that, Jen?
This is what I do to you guys. I catch you off guard.
You did. Yes. You know what? It's not us, Tori. We're not the problem. Jen is.
Hey.
So for me, I think that New 52 Batman is kind of that. So if Batman the Animated Series was kind of these more adult, darker themes in a way children can understand them, right? I feel like New 52 is that same kind of darker adult theme, but for those now adults, if that makes sense. Like it's like It's like, oh yeah, these people were likely exposed to this version of Batman and this version of Joker and all these characters. Like, what might it be like if we kind of kept that audience rather, but changed to their now age groups and see what happened when we, aren't restricted by children's television rules and things like that. So I think it really comes full circle for me. It's by far my favorite Batman line I've ever read. It wasn't the first Snyder thing I read. I had read I had read Volume 1 of American Vampire, and I think various things that may not have been known were written by him that Jen had or just was like, read this. But this one really, for me, in my own kind of world of what I read, put Snyder on the map, where I was like, that is a name I need to remember. And I also need to pick up his other work. I know he did Batman Metal, I think, right? But I've not touched that one. I don't know if it's any good or not, because I have a hard time letting the New 52 one go, which is really interesting because when you think about New 52 as a whole, the general consensus was that it didn't do so well, but Batman New 52 is like that gem right in the middle.
But definitely, it was the central piece of the New 52 line. Everything else sucked.
Yeah, that was the general consensus, was pretty much everything else in New 52 sucked, and the Batman line was fantastic, and go read Rebirth was generally the consensus.
Definitely, you had a Superman title that was suffering, right? A lot of people did not like the direction that Superman was taking, especially some people loved that Wonder Woman, Diana and Clark relationship. I did not like that at all. I am not there for that. I am Lois. I'm Clois forever. I'm Clark and Lois forever. A lot of people did not like what Brenda's pointing to her.
Yeah.
Clark
love
and
Wonder Woman, love Superman, not dating.
I wrote my thesis on Wonder Woman. I love Wonder Woman, but yeah, I'm a Lois fan all the way.
Oh yeah, so like, and Lois was so absent from New 52 too. Like people were just like, where is she? Like, so when it came to like calls for representation, and like here you have a woman, an empowered woman, a smart, intelligent woman that's not appearing on the page anymore. And so that was disturbing for a lot of people. And then when she did appear on the page, she was so written out of character for a lot of people. Like there was this, I think, plot line where she reveals Clark's identity to the public without consulting him. And so people are just like, how could Lois would never do that? Like how could she have done that? And so yeah, a lot of people were not happy with what was happening there. A lot of people weren't happy with Wonder Woman either, I think. It was just not a really good time for comics then, but you had Batman and it was doing so well, and that sort of just became the highlight of the entire reboot of New 52. But yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts about this are, Brenda, like in terms of how does this Batman fit into New 52, into animated for you?
So I actually had a very interesting experience when it comes to Snyder's writing, because I think this was actually the first Snyder thing I read. I don't think I had read American Vampire yet, or it might have been around the same time. But it was during a time when I know I was still working on my degree. And it was just one of those things, when you're in the middle of college, there's a moment where you're just kind of in the grind. And you can either become really infatuated with what you're doing or kind of sick of it, right? And there's a point where I was writing all these papers and I'm like, what's the point of all this? I'm going to get an English lit degree that's going to be useless. What the hell, right? And I don't enjoy the physical act of reading, right? Like having to sit down and physically read something for me is anxiety inducing sometimes, because I feel like there's something else I should be doing, right? But I love a good story, right? So that's actually what brings me back to reading every single time, right? I love good stories. And so when I was reading this, it was one of those things, and I don't think I've ever shared this with anyone. I might have shared it with Jen once, but this kind of story is what brought me back and got me back in love with stories and with my own college experience that I was going through at the time, right? And I'm not going to credit it for being the only thing that got me through college, because Lord knows I'm a first gen kid who had a lot of reasons to finish, right? But it was one of those things that made it a little easier to say, hey, you know what, you enjoy a good story and you love deconstructing this stuff because it's such a rich story. So I think the literary nerd in me grabs onto this for dear life. Like, yes, this is one of those stories that is formative for me as a nerd, but not just as like a nerd, more like a academic nerd as well, right? And I know that in our conversations, and I think, I don't know if you had, well, yeah, you definitely had this experience because you ended up writing your thesis on Snyder's writing, but I think it was because of our conversations about Snyder's work that we were able to kind of reframe our nerdom as an academic interest as well, right? And so I owe a lot to that book as a result of that. I think little Brenda was in love with Batman and didn't understand what that was. I wouldn't say a crush because I didn't understand that either. It was just like, he's my big brother, right? That's what I mean. That kind of love, right?
Yeah.
Where he would protect me, kind of deal. And so I enjoyed that. But I think ultimately with Harley, being one of those characters that constantly came back, and Batgirl, and then Poison Ivy.
Oh.
I don't know. To me, they exist as two very, for me, they're very informed by their time, right? Batman animated series helped me grow as a nerd, whereas Snyder's run really helped me solidify my understanding of what it means to be an academic interested in popular culture.
Wow. I think those are high words of praise that if Snyder hears, he's just going to have like heart emotions. You're having
He's
some like
also our best friend. We met him at WonderCon, and he was talking to Jen for like 20 minutes. He like paused on. He's like, "Everybody, wait! This is more important." And I was talking to Jen, and they had such an amazing moment. Yeah, and I was just the creepy guy behind Jen, like.
We just gushed about Jen for a sec, by the way, just because Jen wrote her thesis on American Vampire and the formation of American identity. And I had the privilege of reading it and helping her with a lot of stuff, like just helping her through ideas, not with anything else. She's just awesome. But she wrote a masterful thesis on Snyder's work. So that's what she was talking to him about, and he was genuinely interested.
Yeah. He lit up like 4th of July when she said she did her thesis, not on his Batman line, not on any of his other lines, but specifically American Vampire. He was like, what? Like...
Oh God. It's a good thing that I'm like dark, like my room is dark, because like I think I'm getting a little red here from all this like praise. For people who also call me a villain. So I'm very confused, guys.
Well, we have to make up for the fact that we called you a villain, so.
Yeah. We're Hufflepuffs, we're quick to forget.
Oh,
I mean, to be fair, every time you break our hearts with one of the graphic novel picks, we also keep coming back for more, so.
Yeah, it's like when you go to the dentist and they're working on your teeth and it hurts, but it feels kind of good. That's Jen's comic picks for us.
Thanks for the meta comparison.
You're welcome.
I would never
compare with that.
The dentist, but yeah, I think we just move on from that comment.
Yes, I think so too. You know, for me, like, I think Brenda does a really nice job of articulating how, you know, each Batman for us has like a certain place in time where he fits in, right? So the animated is very much the animated. What Bruce Timm does there is the animated, right? What Snyder does in New52 is what he does in New52. And I think we're talking about Batman at a different conversation where like we talked about how characters like Batman have in elasticity to them, right? So anyone can jump on board and kind of write for him, and it kind of fits within this kind of monolith of his character. And that's why each writer can have their own spin, and why, you know, certain histories can exist within the monolith, right? And so I think you know, for me, Conroy's Batman is my Batman, he will always have that nostalgic feel. But like as a character, like Snyder's Batman did so much to kind of invigorate my storytelling, right? And understanding of storytelling, and my just it fed a lot of my visual, like, you know, needs, because it was such a gorgeous book, right? It's such a gorgeous book on top of just being such a pleasant read. Not that it's always butterflies and rainbows and unicorns, right? But it's a pleasant read because it's so consistent and so challenging, and it just kind of keeps pushing and pushing. And that's something that I really enjoy about Snyder's work. And you know, we'll talk about American Vampire another day. But I think that's what he does really well, is tell these really good character stories and really good, just epic stories, because I think he's a fan first, and you see that. And I think that's why we also like the animated, because I think clearly Bruce Timm and his team, they're fans. And so that love just pours through, right? It's always like that love first, and why we gravitate to these characters. And so I really enjoy Batman, guys, and I'm glad that I pushed you into it and that you enjoyed it so much.
I'm happy that you pushed us into it, because these are stories worth reading.
Yeah, and I typically of the big three gravitate towards Wonder Woman, so I didn't really expose myself to a whole lot of Batman or even Superman, because unless it was Justice League, just because if I was going to be reading a comic, it was going to be Wonder Woman or Flash or someone else.
Tori, so we're all interested in one of the different big three, right?
Yeah.
You were interested in Wonder Woman, I'm interested in Superman, and Jen's interested in Batman. Interesting.
Yeah, I've always loved Wonder Woman. I've always loved her.
So we're actually we're actually a Trinity Quarantine.
All right, we need to stop.
Oh, and that's a really good shift, actually. So
yeah,
we really appreciate that you joined us once again for this recording. If you're staying with us to the end, we love you guys. We definitely want to provide content for you guys. We love just talking to each other about these things. So thank you for joining in on our crazy. Our next recording is going to be on Jackie Chan Adventures. Yay! And we're really looking forward to that. That's another piece of our childhood that we want to talk to you about. But also, we want to talk to you about this because there's a lot of, I think, Asian hate going around because of coronavirus and COVID-19, however you want to name it. And so we really do want to spotlight a lot of Asian writers and creative works, because, we want to be kind, we want to promote kindness, and we want to, remember that, Asian Americans deserve, Asians and Asian Americans and South Asians and all kinds of Asians, whatever flavor, color that you come in, deserve love. And so that's why we're starting with Jackie Chan Adventures, because that's something that we all grew up with. And you know how we all love to talk about what we grew up with and why we love it. So
I'm really curious what your dad had to say about Jackie Chan growing up.
Yeah, I'll talk about that.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Jen's dad is from China. So I'm really curious what his thoughts were on Jackie Chan. But yeah, no, we will see you guys next time.
We'll see you guys next time. So thank you for joining us. Bye.
Woo!
Woo!